Welcome to the Northern Business Podcast. Each week we talk to people active in business and the economy about the big issues driving growth in the north of England. We're sponsored by Virtue Motors, one of the UK's largest motor retailers. You can see its website at virtuemotors.com. I'm Graham Robb. I own Recognition PR. We help scores of businesses promote their products and services. Some are featured on this podcast. Don't miss an episode. Subscribe on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. We're on audio podcasts like Apple, Spotify and Amazon, as well as live on LinkedIn. In the studio today, we have Danielle Croce, Commercial Director at Intasite, a very interesting new company that's supporting businesses that have big, secure sites. And down the line, we have a lady, I'm very pleased to meet her. She's born in the north of England, and she's a fantastic case study of how someone can make a great career in business. She's Nicola Frampton, Chief Operating Officer at Domino's Pizza UK and Ireland, and she's a non-executive director with Frasers Group, which includes Sports Direct and other famous retail brands. Later, my colleague Josh will be speaking with Louise Murphy, Senior Economist at the Resolution Foundation. So first, my guests, Danielle and Nicola, thank you for joining me. I'll just start with, how do you think the economy and business is? I mean, your business is selling pizzas and also retail as a non-executive director, and you're a business-to-business business. So just give me a little bit of a temperature check to how you see it. Nicola first.
It's tough, actually. I can't pretend it's easy. It's quite tough out there. I think consumers are feeling it in their pocket. I think we've come out of probably the worst of it from last year. But, I think it's still starting to bite in some families' pockets. We're still seeing, I think, mortgage interest rates starting to bite as fixed terms are still expiring and what have you. And I actually think people sort of leaned in really, really hard to the end of the year to have a good finish to 23 and a decent Christmas. And we saw some good trading in both of the businesses that I work with in the latter part of 23, but gosh, it became very difficult at the beginning of the year in January. I think, that all the Christmas spending starts to bite. It's usually gloomy January anyway, isn't it? Let's be honest. It's really tough for the consumer at the moment, and clearly that impacts our businesses.
Well, we'll come back to you on that in just a moment, because I'm very interested to pick up on some of the points you just made. Danielle, now yours is a slightly different business model.
Yeah.
Just tell viewers and listeners what the business does, and then we'll understand how you're doing.
So Intasite is a software platform dedicated to streamlining the induction process for high hazard industries. So we're really there to support site managers to streamline manual processes really, and make sure the induction and onboarding of people coming onto high hazard and safety critical sites is really secure before somebody gets there.
So if I'm an HGV truck driver delivering some container vessel to a big chemical plant, I'll go online with you, won't I, and check I've got my certification right first?
Yeah, so site managers will be able to invite people to sit an induction before they get to site, so they'll be delivered all of the safety information that they need before they actually arrive. Such as skills and contractor qualifications can be uploaded to make sure that everything's in place before the person arrives on site and they're fully equipped to do the job when they get there.
Now, there's a productivity gain, isn't there? So I think that's what's driving your business, I suppose, that the big sites are able to process their visitors more efficiently.
Yeah, so what would have took a lot of time for site managers to come off the job or off-site to deliver inductions for new starters or contractors coming to work. It means the productivity gains are massive. They just save so much time and money by able to do all of that prior to getting to site. Okay,
so now you've explained that. Tell me what you think. Same question I asked Nicola just then. What do you think of the economy at the moment? How's it treating you?
I think the first couple of months in this year has been a little bit difficult, but we are starting to see an increase now. Over the last year, we have kind of seen a couple of site closures or potentially going to close, more amongst chemical sites where there's maybe high gas prices and things like that. But on the flip side, we are seeing an increase in the renewable sector as well. So that's great for us to be able to access that market and see the growth in that area.
And I run a business too, my own business. I think it's been slow but not regressive. We're still advancing, but at a slower pace. Pipeline has slowed down.
Yeah.
I think that's how I would see it. steady as she goes, but I'd like it to go a bit faster, Nicola. I think that's how I feel about business. Now, the news today was that the economy looks like it's coming out of recession because the growth figures for January were published, and there was growth. There was small, but 0.2, almost within the margin of error, maybe a bit more than the margin of error. And you were saying January was difficult, but when people received their pay in January, so effectively February, there was the first of a national insurance cut. Do you think that will impact a little bit?
I think inevitably it will impact. I do hope that people feel the benefits of that national insurance cut in their pockets. I think I haven't done all of the detailed analysis on it from a consumer point of view, but it clearly has benefited some more than others. From my point of view, I think we will definitely see and are seeing in February people are feeling a little bit more happy to spend on, I would say luxury items like, a pizza night in, or, coming out into the retail world of Fraser's Group. But it's definitely anything that we can give consumers to help them feel more confident about the economy, more confident about spending, more able to cover their bills, and therefore do more with, the disposable income that they've got, the better. I hope that, we've obviously got the national insurance cut coming, but there's also the national living wage increase coming up for us in April. That's a very good point.
That's a very significant injection of cash into working people's pockets.
It is. It is quite significant, and a very welcome one from my point of view. I mean, it's a bit of a double-edged sword for businesses like mine, because fundamentally, a lot of that is coming out of the profitability of the company. But I think we see it as an opportunity to sort of ignite a little bit of the consumer spending again, and it will flow back through and just get the economy going. That's certainly one of the things that we're hoping for. So yeah, I think overall it's a good thing, but it will be quite a significant uplift in the wage bill too for businesses, and I think we just have to make sure that we make the best of that.
And there was an element of government policy and Bank of England policy: if it isn't hurting, it isn't working. And it's true, isn't it? If you wanted to defeat inflation, you had to take heat out of the economy. And in America, just yesterday, they announced that they had an uptick in inflation. Everyone in American economics has got very nervous about this. Maybe some of the Joe Biden spending and the restrained interest rates that have happened in America, inflation's ticked back up, and we don't want that. That could be just a more difficulty for a longer and deeper problem.
I agree. Look, I think at the end of the day, bringing down inflation, slowly bringing it down steadily, getting it under control has definitely been the right strategy for us. It's a bit like dieting. It's
very good.
If you do it quickly, it doesn't really, the weight doesn't stay off. You need to do it in a controlled way. And I think it's the same with the economy. So yeah, I think we seem to be on the right track now to get inflation under control. I don't think it's where it needs to be. And, the inflation numbers that we're seeing at the moment, they're definitely improved from a year-on-year point of view, but there is still significant inflationary burden, in the sector. So that's obviously something we still need to be wary of.
What makes me wound up, there's businesses like yours, and smaller businesses like yours and mine, Danielle, and my business, trying to keep our prices under control, trying to make sure the customer gets the best deal. Yeah, then you get regulated businesses like virtually everyone in telecoms and broadband and so on, being allowed by the regulators to put their prices up by 3.9% plus inflation. So you've got broadband bills going up by 7.9%. So there's two economies out there, aren't there? The dynamic enterprise economy and the regulated economy.
That's absolutely right. Look, some of those markets we don't compete with, so it's hard for me to draw comparisons. But I think the important thing for me is the point that you made earlier. It is so difficult for businesses to absorb a lot of these cost increases without passing at least some of it onto the consumer. And You can see it if you do pass a price increase through. You can see it in the consumer behaviour. It's their frequency reduces, their basket size reduces.
Yes.
You can see they are managing to a budget, and in some cases, I think what certainly we see this in Domino's, because a family is managing to a budget. Even if we put the prices up, they will still spend to their budget. And one of two things will happen. They will either buy less, so, our sales go down overall, or they will not buy from you because you're too expensive and will, trade down into something that's perhaps more affordable for them. So it's a real balancing act, and it's very, very difficult for companies to get that right. Price increases to the consumer are not always the obvious thing to do, but there becomes a point where, if you don't pass some of that on, your margin is not covering your costs. So it's a real balancing act. And, any businesses out there that are in the retail space at the moment, we're all facing into the same sort of challenges, and I really feel for them.
I think when it comes to the economy, we all have we've talked about all the data there, but there are obvious things, aren't there? I drive to work the same route every day, and I've noticed the traffic jams are a bit longer. So I'm feeling, that's okay. It might be a bit delayed, but actually you can see there's economic activity going on. A friend of mine runs the Sunday Times business column, David Smith. He has the skip index. He works out, how many skips there are in his street and looks at that as an economic indicator. In the fast retail world of food, what kind of indicator do you look at? What's your easy dipstick note to say? I'm sure your board regularly ask you, how many extra garlic breads have you sold or whatever? What's the kind of thing you look at, Nicola?
Items per order is a good one.
Right,
actually.
yeah.
We are a pizza business, but on the menu you can buy cookies, you can buy fries. I won't go into all fantastic food offers on our menu, but one of the things that we look at will be things like items per order. So a family of four, instead of buying 2 medium pizzas and 2 sides, we'll probably just go for the 2 medium pizzas. So that's where they sort of managing to budget. You can see it. So that's certainly one of the measures that you would typically look at. The other thing that, again, sort of coming back to phrases and flannels, it's a different level altogether. It's a real luxury market that we're operating in with flannels, and what we see there is you look at footfall, and again we'll look at basket, and what we can see is the footfall's still there. People still want to come out of their houses. They still want to go into a really nice retail environment. They want to escape, whatever's been going on in the week, just have a little bit of a break. But instead of maybe investing in a high-end handbag, they'll invest in a high-end lipstick. So effectively, you can see trading down. So you look at the the SKUs that are selling and the patterns of those SKUs, and you can see the shift in the consumer behaviour. So it's things like that we will typically look at. We don't keep skips outside the stores, so it's not.
Well, Luke, that's very helpful. Now, Nicola, I wish I could have you on longer because I've got lots to ask you, but I'm going to ask you this point. One of one of the business founders is Mike Ashley, of course, and he's both a controversial and flamboyant figure. But I shop at these shops we have a House of Fraser in my town, a provincial town in the northeast in Darlington, which is doing great. Well, I don't know how it's doing financially, but it provides great goods and services. I shop in it quite regularly, in flannels and so on. It strikes me that the approach that your group has taken to the high street is helping level up the high street. If you've got a store in a northern town's high street, you're generally helping that high street to survive. And where you don't have, or you used to have, there can be a hole and it's not good. Where do you see the high street and levelling up our towns in the north of England?
Well, I think at the end of the day, there's sort of what's going on in retail is pretty self-evident when you go out onto the high street. To your point, maybe counting the number of empty stores out there is one of the measures that you can look at around the general health of retail. And I do think this has led a lot of people to conclude that the future of retail is really gloomy. But I think I'd argue that certainly what we've seen over the last few years is that despite the economic headwinds, there are certain parts of the high street that have proven to be much more resilient than even I think we would have expected. And I think our experience would suggest that if you as a retailer keep on top of the changes and you're actually willing to innovate as we have, it is actually possible to build a future where physical stores and online platforms actually, exist together. I mean, firstly, it's the diversity. It's putting the right sort of level of proposition onto the right street. We have kind of 3 pillars: sport, as you'll know it, Sports Direct, but also premium and luxury. Luxury being the flannels element, and where you put those fascias really is determined by what you think is the right solution for that particular location.
There's no question. Go on. Sorry, I interrupted.
No, carry on.
I just think your actual stores have an agglomeration effect. In my own town in Darlington, where your store, House of Fraser, has definitely created an agglomeration in that part of our town. There is another part of the town that's not as high end, and it's definitely suffering. But actually, if you were to count empty stores around your store, they have diminished. You
do. And, I find you certainly see that we will anchor quite a lot of propositions. And, if a Sports Direct relocates to a new location, if we put up a flagship store, you typically see quite a lot of people sort of following you and following the footfall that you effectively create from being there. So yeah, I certainly think that's something that we're doing. I mean, we absolutely like the sort of ecosystem environment. We don't go out there just to try and grow Sports Direct. We are trying to sort of build a sense of community and put something back in. We opened a Sports Direct recently in Cardiff, for example. And, it's created such a buzz. I was actually down there working in a store, went back to do a couple of days in retail. And I went out just to grab some lunch and was grabbed by the local sort of council leader, just say thank you for bringing a Sports Direct onto our high street, because it's reinvigorated it. The community felt that we were investing in them. And I think increasingly this dialogue around retailers, it's use it or lose it. If you're not going to go, don't complain. It's not, the high street's dying. You have to use these stores. Clearly, it's incumbent on us as the retailer to give people a reason to go. But as soon as you start to create that presence and people start to, collate around you, you create an environment where the community can go and can start to re-engage with the high street.
Nicola, as I say, I could talk to you for a long time, and I'm very please come back on our podcast. Can I just ask you in one last question, which is about you personally? It was International Women's Day last week. You grew up in Bradford. You've had this successful career where you've just said you were in the shop floor. You were on the shop floor. Then you went on. You ran William Hill, the bookmakers. Then you've gone into Domino's. You're on the board of Fraser's Group. What would you say to other younger women who want to pursue a business career, not necessarily a career that they can plot out as easily as all that?
I suppose it's you are your greatest investment, would be my advice. I think if you don't know where you want to be, or you know where you want to be that you can't actually get there, don't worry about it. Just take the best opportunity you've got at the time in front of you and give it your all. Own it and back yourself would be the best advice I would give. I left school at 16. I started working in an admin role, and I just made sure that I was always my best self when I turned up at work, and always put my hand out for an opportunity or growth. And I wasn't afraid to say, actually, this isn't the role for me, I need to move on. But I did spend a lot of time reflecting on what was it in that role that I really liked, and what was it about that role that, equally I didn't like. And just build your way through. Just take the best opportunity you have at the time and give it your all. I think, if you're a team player, you start to stand out. And as you progress, the thing that I've learned is bring the people who've helped you progress with you and help them be successful. Okay. Recognise them and help them.
We're going to wrap there, and I'm going to segue it nicely into the last word from Danielle. You're a younger woman in business. How did you respond to International Women's Day, and what were your thoughts on what Nicola said just then?
Yeah, I mean, for me, my biggest inspiration came from my grandmother years ago. She was the one who helped kickstart my business, back in 2009, which I've since paid back since then. But she really helped me and inspired me on my journey today. And then having 2 young children myself, 2 young girls, I think it's just really important to kind of, pave the way for them and show them, what you can be and what you can achieve. So yeah, it's a really important time, I think, and it's really just inspiring the next generation, really, especially the women, but also for us, I think, in business, being in that male dominated industry, it's also about celebrating their achievements as well. And as part of our business, we've just hired our second female in the business, so that was a big achievement for Intasite. But we also wouldn't be where we are today without the males in the business too. So yeah, well, I think it's about a team effort and collaboration.
Nicola, Danielle, thank you very much for joining us. We're going to turn to something else to close the podcast, and I hope you both come back again soon. Thank you very much. Now over to my colleague Joss, who spoke with Louise Murphy. It's all women guests today, as you can see, senior economist at the Resolution Foundation.
Thanks, Graham. This week I'm joined by Louise Murphy. She is a senior economist at the Resolution Foundation. She's the co-author of this paper that I've got here in front of me. We've only just begun. It's all around young people's mental health in the workplace. Now, I've read little bits of this, Louise. I must admit I haven't had a full time to read all of it. So for our viewers and listeners, could you give us a little bit of a summary about what the report looks at?
Yes, of course. So our report focused broadly on young people's mental health and how that's impacting both their education and also their chances of finding employment. And what we found is that there's a mental health crisis in the UK among young people, with now around 1 in 3 young people estimated to have a common mental disorder. So that's things like anxiety, depression, or bipolar disorder. And this is having real knock-on impacts on both young people's education and then their chances of finding work. So first of all, for example, young people with poor mental health are more likely to miss school due to absence and are more likely to be out of work due to sickness.
Okay, and when you talk about, is this long-term sickness, is this short-term sickness, is it repetitive series of sickness absences?
Exactly. So when we look at the impacts in the world of work, it is really this long-term sickness that we're interested in. So it's not, people missing 1 or 2 days, being, kind of calling in sick, as it were. It's people that are not in employment altogether due to sickness or disability. So people who don't have an employer at all. And we know that among young people, age 18 to 24, the number of people in this group has doubled in the past decade, and now it stands at around 200,000 young people who are not working due to poor health.
Now, this is a big question, Louise, but why do you think that is? Why do you think there's this change recently?
So, of course, there's lots of things at play, and there's lots of health problems and disabilities that affect people. It will look different for every individual, of course. But when we look at trends over the past couple of decades, it really is the rise in mental health problems that stands out. So, for example, back in 2000, when we looked at the prevalence of mental health problems among all age groups, young people were actually least likely to have poor mental health, and it was those older people who were slightly more likely to have poor mental health. Whereas now, by the 2020s, the picture looks really different. And we've seen very striking increases in mental health problems among young people, and particularly among young women and girls. And so I think that stands out. And for example, then when we look at the demographics of those young people who are not working due to poor health, the most common
person.
Sorry?
Is there a particular type of person who's commonly calling in for or taking absences for these reasons?
Well, exactly. What does stand out on the first thing to note is that the biggest or the most common type of health problem is mental health problems. So, of course, other things like physical disabilities or progressive illnesses play a part, but mental health problems are the single biggest group. And secondly, when thinking about, the demographics or the makeup of this group, the other thing that is really worth bearing in mind is that these people who are not working due to ill health also tend to have very low levels of qualifications. So, for example, 4 in 5 of these young people who are not working due to ill health don't have a qualification above GCSE level, which I think is really striking because it just shows how interrelated poor health and low levels of qualifications are. And really, I think that's important for policymakers to bear in mind when thinking about what might help these people find work.
So you mentioned policymakers there. What would you like to see them do that might help address some of these issues, or make it easier for these people to get back into work, or maybe provide them with the support in the workplace that they need to be able to do their job?
Well, exactly. I think we think action is important across those different dimensions that you mentioned. Mm-hmm. So first of all, this is ultimately a health problem. So we think better early intervention with health support in schools and colleges is really important. Of course, that must go alongside funding core NHS services, but what we heard from young people and what survey evidence shows is that children and young people really value mental health and wellbeing support within schools and colleges. So, for example, we think there should be a rollout of mental health support teams throughout all schools and colleges in England. But secondly, we should also think about what we can do to help those young people with poor mental health get the qualifications they need to find good quality work. So, for example, that will involve better support for those young people who fail their GCSEs and have to resit, and also better careers advice and guidance for those young people that are not set for university and who might be considering other options like college or apprenticeships. And then finally, as you mentioned, there's also a really important role for employers. Mm-hmm. You know, we should remember that a good chunk of these young people with poor health are actually already in the workforce. For example, when we look at some sectors like retail and hospitality that have a lot of young people in them, 1/3 of those young employees have poor mental health. And so we think that managers and employers in those sectors should really improve their management practices, for example, to better support those young people to stay in work and to thrive and progress in the workplace.
Well, Louise, it's a very interesting report. As I said, it's called We've Only Just Begun. It's from the Resolution Foundation. If I was a person who wants to go online and read this report and, you know, take away some of the recommendations for my own workplace, where could I find it?
Yes, it's available online. It's on the Resolution Foundation website. You should be able to find it hopefully fairly easily on there.
Really, Google's a magical thing. Listen, Louise, thank you very much for your time. We're going to go back to Graham now, but hopefully we'll be able to speak to you soon when you've got another very interesting report out. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Joss, and also Louise. Now, if you'd like to join us as a guest on the Northern Business Podcast, do get in touch. We'd love to hear from you. Thanks to the podcast producer, Harry Sinclair, and our technical operator, Robin Campbell. Join us next time for the Northern Business Podcast. Don't miss an episode. Like, rate and subscribe on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts.